In three, two, one. Raised in auto obsessed Los Angeles during the 1960s and 70s, our guest spent his youth hanging around the dealerships where his dad sold cars. This experience bred a lifelong interest in both the cars and the business of selling them. And he's enjoyed a long and successful career, first as a sales manager for retail autos, and later shifting gears to work in aircraft.
Joining the MECUM team in 2006, John Kraman served as the co-director of consignments for MECUM Auctions alongside Frank MECUM. Beginning in 2008 and continuing today, Kraman has been the commentator of MECUM Auctions broadcast on NBC Sports Network, Motor Trend TV, and others. And he's here to tell us about his fascinating career journey in the world of classic cars and broadcasting.
Thanks, Don. And with that, let's welcome John Kraman to Break Fix.
Hey guys, man, I just want to say thank you so much for taking some time to have me on your show. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. And my illustrious co-host tonight, returning for the 100th time, it seems like, is Don Weberg from Garage Style Magazine. So welcome back, Don.
Thank you. Thank you for having me once again. You tolerate me so well.
One of my favorite magazines, by the way, Don. Love the publication.
Thank you. We love MECUM, so it's all hand in glove,
Amen. Yep.
Well, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, MECUM and Garage Style have been together for a long, long time. It's interesting. Eric and I were talking about that a couple of weeks ago. About, my God, has it been that long? Which is really kind of interesting. So,
well, let's get to it then, gentlemen. Like all good break fix stories, everybody has a superhero origin. So let's talk about young John Kraman, the petrolhead, and what led up to your involvement at MECUM. And what's important about your story is growing up in LA, growing up a California native, spending your formative years there. You've been exposed to so many spectacular cars there in Southern California. Let's talk about growing up in LA, some of the cars you own, some of your favorites of the era, dream cars, things like that.
Yeah, I was lucky, being like a lot of people, like a lot of classic boomers, always just fascinated with cars. But I had a big advantage growing up in Southern California during the time period where the Corvette was starting to come on its own, the invention of the muscle car. And I was right there as a little kid, just soaking up and absorbing all the nuance of that in real time when it was happening. My dad worked for a very well-known Pontiac dealership in North Hollywood, California, in Lankershim, called Harry Maher Pontiac. I mean, a legendary dealership, supplying a lot of vehicles to the movie, TV industry, as they were right down the street there from all the studios. And that auto dealership, by the way, noteworthy for that was the used car scene. We all remember the movie Psycho and the famous used car scene. Well, that was filmed right there at Harry Maher Cadillac, 1960, a few years before my dad started working there. But that dealership still exists today, wouldn't you know it? And that building shown in Psycho is still there. It is now Universal BMW Mini. Isn't that typical of how things evolve and how things happen? So anyway, as a little kid growing up there, I used to literally hang out at the dealership, talk to customers, look at the cars, read the brochures, and I became fascinated with the whole culture of cars, selling cars, servicing cars, being in the automobile dealership. It was kind of my happy place as a kid, never thinking that all these years later that enthusiasm and a little bit of that knowledge would be useful for my role at MECUM. Never planned on that. Just a little kid loving cars.
So running between the aisles of cars at the Pontiac dealership, here you are, young John in the mid-60s, and the GTO hits the showroom floor. What is your first impression?
Yeah, totally, man, totally blown away. That car left such an impression on me as a youngster that let's see, get the math right here, in July of 1976, when I was a tender 19 years old, I bought a 1964 Pontiac GTO, and I still own that exact car today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Almost 50 years later.
What color?
Cameo ivory, which is white with the dark aqua interior, and it's a two-door hardtop body style, 389 tri-power, 4-speed, just like the song.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, but that set the stage for my obsession with cars. And being around it. And I remember my dad actually having me talk to customers and explain various features. Of course, cars were a lot simpler then. Various features, options. I had the options list memorized, the different engines, the transmissions, the gear ratios, what it all meant. And there were actually several times that I can recall, my dad tells a story completely differently, that I did all the work. But I remember adding my 2 cents on several of the deals that my dad actually got put together. And he always said that they kind of took pity on a guy with a young kid there that was hanging out the dealership. But the reality is no place else I would rather be. So anyway, to bring this story to a head, my dad continued to sell cars. He eventually went and sold Oldsmobiles right down the street at Pioneer Oldsmobile. And that is now that's North Hollywood Toyota, one of the biggest Toyota dealerships in the San Fernando Valley, maybe the biggest in the Valley, one of the biggest in LA, I think. So that, kind of goes without saying as well, that the evolution of the new world has occurred. Pontiac and Oldsmobile both gone now, replaced by very popular imports. But anyway, it's fun for me every once in a while. I get back out there and I go around my own stomping grounds and go past the old Barris Custom City store. George Barris, of course, king of the customizers, had his shop there. Saw the Batmobile go together within a matter of a couple of weeks, and saw it on the TV show, and got to know George later. And I'm still friends with Joji, his daughter, to this day. And so I still continue to kind of, tap into the influence and all of the really cool stuff that was going on back in that time period. Music, fashion, cars. There were civil rights that were changing as well, that were much needed. And it was a heck of a decade to be this wide-eyed kid, really just picking up on all of the nuance of it. I remember all the press of the Vietnam War. I tried to kind of discount that. That was a little bit over my head, and stay focused on the cars and then all the pop culture stuff as well. So it set me up. Bottom line, of course, of that is it set me up to do what I do, and that's go on TV and talk about cars and kind of what was happening back in the eras, the 50s and the 60s and the 70s.
So you mentioned something important, Pontiac and Oldsmobile, two brands that are no longer with us. Maybe you can find them on the pages of ancient Encyclopedia Britannicas. And you said they were replaced by more popular imports. So that begs the question, were there other cars outside of the Pontiac and Oldsmobile dealership that got your attention? Is there something more beautiful than the GTO? Is there a car that you hold in regard that is a dream car?
Well, actually, there's a couple. And the first one that comes to mind, and like a lot of youngsters, and even those folks that aren't so young, the first time that they got a glimpse of the all-new Chevrolet Stingray in 1963, was a game changer for me. It was I remember it vividly. It was a saddle tan coupe with a matching interior. And I remember looking inside it and thinking it had a manual transmission, and it dawned on me that, no, wait a minute, it looks like a manual transmission shifter, but it was actually an automatic. And I always point that out on our TV show from time to time when I see one. But that 63 Corvette to this day continues just to captivate me with its design and style, the futuristic look. And I'm not the only one. And while I've owned 3 Corvettes, a 72, a 2010, and one of the mid-engine cars, it's 2020. That 63 Corvette has always just been a little bit out of my reach. It just, every year they go up and up. Maybe I'll have one someday, but I've got a nice collection of plastic replicas, and for right now, that's going to have to do. But another car or two that really made a huge impact on me was the Ford Mustang, coming out about the same time that the GTO did. But interestingly, it wasn't the convertible and the coupe that first came out in April 1964 that left a memory. Is when I saw the first Fastback 2+2, which came out about 6 months later. And that car means so much to me that eventually I succumbed to the blue oval and bought one of the retro style modern era Mustangs, the S197 platform, 2014, the last year. Coupe, ordered it black with the Coyote 5-liter and a 6-speed, it's a GT. And that car's got 25,000 miles on it, and I love it. And that will always be a part of my collection as well. And the fact that it kind of looks vintage-esque in a lot of the different clues helps me kind of connect the dot from the modern era back to the vintage day, but yet with all the performance and reliability and serviceability of a modern car. So, and then the final car I want to mention, I'm going to do a shout out, thanks to the folks at Pioneer Oldsmobile, long gone now, was the very first 1966 Oldsmobile Tornado that I saw, the landmark front wheel drive car that debuted, of course, in late 1965. I remember seeing the first one at the dealership. It was turquoise, and the wheel arches, the long hood, the short deck, the rotating drum speedometer, the flat floor in the front, because it's front wheel drive, no transmission hump or drive shaft. To this day, I consider that to be one of the most beautiful cars ever. It did win Motor Trend Car of the Year, by the way. And again, I mean, I don't own it. I don't own a Tornado, but that would be one I would probably have on my short list if I could get some space in my 6-car garage, which is currently full.
You need quite a bit of space for the Tornado.
Yeah, it's a big car.
I think it defines. I think it's set not only the record for first front wheel drive, but also for land yacht. But but that being said, so they're not all winners, John. I think we can all agree on that. Is there a car that sort of gets under your skin, something you can't stand, you don't like?
Well, how about the car that my dad brought home for me to go take my driver's license test in? All right. Being a car salesman back in those days, they had demos and they could drive a car off of from the lot. I don't think that they do that much anymore. Maybe some of the higher ranking sales managers get to drive a vehicle, but I think the rank and file salespeople, I think that perk is long gone. But anyway, so my dad, he brings home for me car off of the used car lot, was a 1972 Chevrolet Vega sedan, beige, with a 3-speed, not a 4-speed, but a 3-speed manual transmission on the floor. And I only had a limited amount of time driving a manual shift car. And bottom line is I took that car and I got my driver's license and I passed my test, thank goodness. But to this date, I've got kind of a love-hate relationship with the Chevy Vega. It was the car I got my license in, but on the other hand, it's turned out to be one of the worst cars ever built. Certainly the powertrain was pretty poor. The aluminum block with a cast iron cylinder head with the dissimilar metal of those two completely different materials, and that heavy head caused a tremendous amount of head gasket problems. And then you didn't have any cylinder liners. So the rings would wear into that aluminum bore almost instantly. Terrible engine. So I'm gonna vote for the Chevy Vega as the car that I don't miss.
Well, and you know what's fun about this is growing up amidst the deep seated car culture in Southern California. Everywhere you turn, every block you walk down, every street corner, there's something different, something unique. A movie star's driving this, a regular guy's driving that. The doctor just bought a Ferrari, all these kinds of things. So, I mean, I'm envious. If you didn't grow up on one of the two coasts, you kind of missed out, right? It was basically Chevy, Ford, or Mopar. What you gonna order this week, kind of thing. But at some point, all of us have to grow up, right? And we're going to get deeper into your MECUM career as well. But you said you worked in sales, you worked with your dad and those kinds of things. But what did you go to school to do? And how did that lend itself towards your future?
Well, I was one of those guys that was fortunate enough to realize that one way or another, I was going to have something to do with cars. So by the time that I got into high school, I took every auto shop class that I could possibly take. And I just want to say in the public school system now, those are really hard to find. But back in the day, this would have been the early 70s, pretty much every school had them. And I took full advantage of that. And was able to, in my senior year, I was able to actually go to what was called, we called it VOTEC. And I went, and that was 3 hours a day. I went to auto shop, and I mean, we did literally everything from A to Z. The only thing that I didn't do was body work. But from a mechanical standpoint, we did everything from A to Z: engines, transmissions, rear ends. And we would work on other people's cars, students' cars, teachers' cars, outside cars. And while I was doing that, I worked for a very prominent high-performance speed shop called Sterling Speed Engineering. Now, this time, in my junior high school, we'd actually moved from California to, of all places, Rockford, Illinois, which is actually where I was born, but we moved to California when I was 5. So we moved back to the Midwest, and I worked in a speed shop that's still very well known today, and cut my teeth on working in the machine shop on the high performance engines of that time period, everything from Hemis and big block Chevys, small block Chevys, pretty much everything across the board, the Ford FE engines, a lot of 427 Ford engines. And, being able to be hands-on with that also over the years has given me a lot of insight, a lot of background, a lot of experience to be able to talk about all of this. We're talking, 50 years later now. So all of that worked to make me this, obviously this pretty well-versed car kid. But at age 19, my career took a different path. I became an aircraft mechanic because a friend of mine that lived behind me worked at an engine overhaul shop that overhauled aircraft engines. And he said, we're hiring people like crazy. And when I talked to his boss, and he hired me immediately. And so I had a really good career. Eventually I got my pilot's license and I learned to fly. And then I transitioned, took my sales enthusiasm and sold airplanes. And I did that actually for 20 years, from 1986 to 2006. I sold airplanes and worked on them as a mechanic, as an instructor, as a pilot, and an aviation enthusiast. Again, being very mechanically oriented, that helped. Being a pilot obviously helped, and understanding the sales process helped as well. And that's where my background with MECUM started, 2006. A fellow pilot, David Burrows, who's the founder of Bloomington Gold, if you recognize that name.
Yeah, David
He's
Burrows.
Yeah, very well-known guy, both in the Corvette world and then, of course, in the aviation world. He is a steerman, where we're two trainer enthusiasts, and he's an instructor pilot and a formation pilot in that group, and still does that to this day. Anyway, long story short, he put Dana and I together. He knew I was this car geek and an airplane geek. And I spent about, and I'm exaggerating, 15 minutes talking to Dana, and boom. He said, John, I'm looking to expand this business, looking to get some people that can help me. He said, we're a big auction company now. We'll do about $80 million in sales this year. This was 2006. But he said, I'd like to build this business up to be $125,000. Well, fast forward to 2022, I'm proud to say that MECUM Auctions generated, ready for this, guys, $785 million in the sale of collector vehicles calendar year 2022. That's not that far off of our target now of $1 billion. And it's been one wild, crazy ride, guys. I can tell you that.
Wow. Almost $1 billion. Unbelievable.
Yep.
That's a lot of Corvettes.
Corvettes are the #1 most popular single model of the entire MECUM auction block. Corvettes are #1, representing roughly about 10% of the total inventory. So, man, you're right. A lot of Corvettes. You put kind of muscle.
I always make that joke because you probably know I write some of the descriptions for MECUM.
Yes, you do. Yep.
And I come from a blue oval family, so I'm much more comfortable with blue oval stuff. But it's funny how many Chevys I've written working for MECUM. It absolutely blows me away and it's funny, it's gotten to a point now. I think I know more now about Chevys than I do Fords, which is really, really interesting. But I was just telling Eric the other day, Eric will remember, he and I were bantering it back and forth, 911 versus Corvette. And I found myself in the corner of the Corvette and, this and this and this and this. In the back of my mind, I'm sitting there, why do I know so much about Corvette? Oh, MECUM, of course. It's really kind of funny the way it just all rubbed off. So yeah, when you go back through and you look at all the Corvettes MECUM has sold, it's insanity how many Corvettes go through MECUM.
You know how we settled that? You know how we settled that debate, John?
It'll never be settled, so I'm really anxious to hear how you guys resolved it.
The answer was Dodge Viper ACR 2016.
Oh yeah.
Pivot.
Yeah, we need that tie killer,
Yep. Pivot. I love that. Yeah, and that's a classic battle, man. Since the 911 came out in 1965, what a sensation that car has been. The big advantage, I think, and I love both cars. Biggest advantage the Corvette has over the 911 typically is value. It's a less expensive car. So if you're looking, bang for the buck, the Corvette's got the edge, arguably. But if you're looking for obviously world-class, distinctive car with a rich history, it's pretty hard to go wrong with a 911. And I think the resale value of those things kind of prove that point. In a perfect world, you'd have one or multiples of each. But that 63 Corvette I mentioned earlier, that drove home the point for me that I wanted Corvettes to be a part of my life. And I'll tell you, I just adore them. There's just something about being behind the wheel of those cars. 3 different distinct generations. I love them all equally, and they all take me to a different place when I'm behind the wheel. And all of them are equally the place that I want to be, just at different times. Very fun.
Yeah. Yeah, they all are amazing. 911, Corvette, any of them. And it's funny, we can argue till kingdom come and literally still not have a winner because both of
Right.
us are right. You know, and
Yeah.
then have the Viper guy step in and what the heck, we'll have a three for all, you know. And none of us are going to be exactly wrong. We just have different, you know, it's amazing. It really, really is. But you know, if you really want to talk great cars, John, and I think Eric will agree with me here on this. You know, it really comes down to it. Chrysler's TC by Maserati.
Oh
It
my
gets no
God.
better, am I right?
Oh my God. Here we go again.
I've got a good story about one of those. Of course, you know,
I
Mika,
knew you would.
we do about 35,000 cars a year. We are, of course, the undisputed world's largest collector car auction company by far. So yes, we've had the Maserati TCs, and we had one. This goes back probably at least a dozen years ago. It was on TV, and it brought like $6,000, which they're still, depending on the condition, it's still a $6,000 car. Anyway, the guy that bought the car was next to his buddy, and I don't know why the camera and the microphone was on these guys, but his buddy says, "Hey man," he said, "I didn't know you wanted that car." He said, "Did you really want that car?" And he looked over at his buddy, it clears a bell, and said, "No, not really. I just wanted the hat." Back in that time period, you'd buy a car and you'd sign the bid sheet, and the gals would give you a MECUM hat. It was hysterical. And to this day, we still talk about that and make jokes about that. One of the great moments in MECUM history we'll never forget. It's kind of like the scene from Caddyshack where, they're in the they're in the pro shop buying supplies, and the judge has got, that real ugly, corny hat on, and Rodney Dangerfield looks over and says something to the effect of, "Hey, look at that hat. I bet you get a free bowl of soup with that hat." Same kind of a deal. Same kind of a deal.
Oh, but it looks good on you, though.
Yeah, looks good on you, though. Right.
Looks good on
That's
you,
the
though,
scene. That's the scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
Well, Don, keep us going. You're up next.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, I got to catch up. Eric is much faster than me, so hold on.
But Don,
I'm the
John
the
talks faster
911.
than I do, and that's tough, right? So
Okay. Well, one thing we've had on our mind, John, is how on earth do you go from the director of sales to the voice of MECUM? How do you transition from signing people up to sell their cars, which I assume that's what director of sales does,
Exactly.
to now you're going to be the voice of MECUM? How do you do that?
Yeah, well, I have to give all the credit to Dana MECUM. Dana MECUM is the company founder. He started MECUM Auctions in 1988, so we're celebrating 36 years of MECUM Auctions this year. It was him and his wife, Patty. Their boys were little. In fact, all four sons heavily involved in the business right now. And he had a dream that he wanted to do this auction company, and it started to get kind of some good momentum going. I got started with the company in 2006, and in 2008 we went on television. And Dana came to me and goes, "Hey, John," he said, "just put together a deal for a TV show." And I thought, "Oh, that's good. That'll really increase our business. Our visibility will go way up." I said, "Smart move, smart move." Never dreaming or thinking about it for even 1 second, guys, that I would be on this TV show. I don't have any experience. I never did TV. I had no idea what it entailed. And he said to me, "And I think you would be a good guy to be on the show." And I kind of had this panic just sort of overwhelm me. And because I don't want to disappoint the boss, but I also don't know anything about being on TV. So he says, "I've talked to the producer. His name is Terry Lingner. He's a well-known automotive producer, by the way." And he said, "I talked to Terry and he wants you to come to his studio in Indianapolis and do a little kind of a mock screen test." And I said, "All right." So I went down there. Long story short, well, at the time, Terry Lingner, this was 2008, was the producer, and his company was producing Barrett Jackson. And it just so happened that he had hours and hours and hours of footage, both audio and video footage. So he put video up on his screen, slapped a headphone on me, and took the audio out and said, "Just as these cars come up, just talk about the cars." And I think 3 cars popped up, and I remember 2 of them. The first one that came up was a 68 Roadrunner. I mean, we can talk 3 hours on a 68 Roadrunner, right? The second car that comes up was a 67 Corvette and had a big block hood. And I didn't know which engine it had, of course, but I knew it was a 67 Corvette convertible with a big block hood. Again, an easy car to talk about. And I ID'd correctly the cars, gave a little bit of background and the significance of both cars. And Terry was talking to me on the headset. And he goes, man, he said, wow. He said, you know these cars? And I said, well, I am a car guy. And he goes, but here's the deal. To be on TV, you have to be able to listen and take timing commands for commercial breaks and all these other things and featurettes, and let's listen in, all these different things, but yet you have to continue your thought and not stop talking when somebody's talking in your ear. Can you do that? And I said, well, I don't know. And he goes, well, let's try it. So another car rolls up. I forget what it was. And I'm talking about it. And he says, okay, well, we have to go to commercial break in 30 seconds. And all I could think of was somebody's talking to me. Stop talking. I didn't want to talk all over him. So he goes, no, John. He said, you can't do that. You got to finish your thought. You got time to finish your thought. And we struggled with it for about 20 minutes. He goes, do you think you could do it? And I said, I don't know. I said, Terry, I don't know. He said, let's give it a try on the show. Fast forward to the first show. I can't tell you when it kind of crossed over, but he told me before I went there, he said, John, you need to keep one thing in mind. You're the car guy. All the other people you're going to be working with, they're experienced television talking heads. You're the car guy. All you need to do is sit back and talk cars. And that's when it hit me, guys, that, well, I've been spending my whole life talking cars. It's one of the only things I know how to do. So anyway, we gave it a shot, and here we are now, guys, 16 years later, hit TV show. We're second year with Motor Trend. I'm the lead TV commentator analyst. I've transitioned away, starting in 2017, away from being director consignments along with Frank MECUM into director of company relations, being the company spokesperson, attending a lot of car shows and events and speaking, a lot of interviews, podcasts, all kinds of stuff, which takes up almost all of my time. I don't know how I had time to handle consignments, but the bottom line is the company has grown radically over the years. And certainly our exposure on television has been a huge part of that, obviously. But for me personally, imagine, this car guy growing up in California and the stars aligning perfectly to the point where I'm the guy representing, the rank and file car guy. Guys like you, maybe that are not on TV, you just got to know, man, I've got your back. I want to make sure two things. I want to make sure that the dialogue is accurate, and I want to make sure that the dialogue is relevant. And sometimes I steer the show a little bit if the other guys start getting off into a different direction that may not be either accurate or relevant. I gently and quietly come in and kind of reel the conversation back in. And all these years later, we're very respected as not only being a great auction company, a great company to do business with, but also real, true enthusiasts and real, true car guys. And I think that resonates with a lot of the folks out there that are car guys that sometimes get disappointed with how cars and how car people and all that stuff are portrayed on television, especially when there's inaccurate information being portrayed, especially when that's happening. And not on my watch.
Yeah, John, I was just going to ask you, it's been crossing through my mind, and if you don't want to answer, I fully understand, but how much, when you're out there commentating, you're doing your thing on the TV, you're talking about that Roadrunner, the Vet, the Viper, whatever it is, how much of that is Kraman and how much of that is Google? I mean, do you have computer assistants there? Do you have that? Or is it just literally you having to, oh my God, being the Rain Man of cars here? How does that work?
Okay, remember what I said earlier, that Terry Linger, the first producer, who ended up producing, I don't know, maybe the first 3-4 seasons of us. Terry Linger told me, John, all you got to do is sit back and talk cars. So no, I don't have a computer. I don't have one there up at our announce booth. Mm-hmm. I do have the description of the car that's as supplied by the consignor that everybody else has access to. The public has access to that. It's up on the website. It's up on the bid screen. I do have that in front of me when there's information on it. Sometimes it's a wife might consign a car that morning and her husband passed away the week before and she needs to sell the car and she doesn't know anything about it. It's a sad tale. We don't talk about that on the show, but that happens. And then sometimes the information as it's relayed isn't always accurate. So I have to kind of check it on the fly. But all the other tidbits, all the historical background and the facts and the figures and the production numbers and colors and engine sizes and options and why this is an important car, all of that's 100% sit back, relax, talk cars. Now, keep in mind, you think, oh, that's impressive. Cars on the auction block less than 2 minutes, and we have a lot of ground to cover on that car, including some of the bidding action. So it's not like I have to do a half-hour documentary on the car. I would probably do some research if I was going to do that on a specific car. So we wanted to make it feel like it's car guys sitting around talking cars, not reading off the script, which we're not reading off a computer screen, which we're not, and I don't even have access to Google. Now, I do typically have my cell phone up there with me, but I will tell you the cars come up in the auction block and leave so quickly, as we're doing about 350 cars a day. There's no time even to input and put it in. So if I don't know something, I just won't say it. I will stay within my knowledge box. And fortunately, there's enough there to, cover what I need to cover. So.
Right. Now, you're relying a lot on the camera, aren't you? So given what you just said, I'm assuming you're relying a lot on that camera, the camera that's down, looking at the car, going over 100%. The car. You're probably looking at what the camera's looking at. You're seeing certain details and you're saying, okay, it has this, it has this, it has this. And you're talking about those pieces, right?
Exactly. And, I'm not sure a lot of people have even thought it's interesting that you say that, because in the early days, I would be actually looking at the car. It was instinctive to look at the car and not what we call our program monitor. Our program monitor is a screen, just like this computer screen is right in front of me, that's actually showing what's going out to the viewer. It's what the production truck is choosing for images to go out there. And I'm looking at that, not the car. I could do it at home on my computer, looking at the program monitor.
Right.
So that's exactly what I'm doing. So if the camera is looking at the taillights and I've got a tidbit about taillights, I'll talk about it. I'm not going to talk about taillights if we're looking at the steering wheel or the shifter or in the engine compartment or at a wheel and tire. So you're exactly right. You're exactly right. And over years, I've learned just to sit back, be conversational, and anticipate how long the camera is going to be there and where it probably is going to head next.
Got it. Now, could you ask the camera guy, go back to a certain area or go to this area if you wanted to see something?
Very rarely that will happen. It'll typically be one of the floor reporters, not me in the booth. I won't do that. But sometimes they'll do it themselves. If for some reason, if they leave the interior and I'm still talking about the console and the shifter and the shift knob, they're listening. They can't talk to me because there's a limited amount of people that have access to the announce team that can actually talk to them because of distraction purposes. But I'll see the camera, then I'll see it start to pan back in while I finish out my thoughts. And that's a pretty common trick. So, obviously heads up to our total 100% pro, TV crew. It's about 45 people to put on the TV show, even though there's 6 announcers. I always say we get to do the easy part. I sit back and talk cars. It's all those guys lugging cameras and dealing with sound and camera angles. And, it looks seamless and it looks nonstop, and it is to the viewers. But I will tell you, there's a lot of moving parts, not only to the TV production aspect, but also in conjunction with the actual auction itself. The execution of the auction is a major operation, and it's got to blend well with TV. And over the years, we've learned really to work together. Everybody gets along. There's no tension. There's no egos. We just get out there and we do it and we pack it up. And a couple of weeks later, we're doing the same thing somewhere else, and it's just nonstop.
Got it. Eric, do you want me to go where the highlight is? Sorry.
No, you did that. That's where you are right now.
That's what I thought. That's what I really don't want to go there.
No. I'm gonna take that in segue. So
John, I'll tell you what that was. He highlights something if he wants me to talk about it, and it was highlighted. But you and I naturally, just through the conversation, went right into it. So I was looking at we're kind of.
It's also so that he remembers. It also so he remembers where we are, but that's okay.
That helps.
So. What's fun about this? So what's fun about this, John, is watching the MECUM auctions on television when you can't be there and listening to the banter that you have with the other announcers. It's on par with watching a basketball game or a baseball game or something like that. But even for those of us in the racing community, it's not too different even than listening to IMSA TV, where John Hindhoff is, constantly going on all this encyclopedic data about the cars and the drivers and all that kind of stuff. So for me, as a newcomer to the auction scene, watching the MECUM programs on Motor Trend has been beneficial because it helps me augment knowledge that I have, but it's also, you guys are picking on certain things that maybe I wouldn't notice even if I was there. And so I can see, listening to you guys in my ear, even while I was live, enriches the experience. And so having having you guys there as commentators, I think is ultimately beneficial and just makes the experience so much better. But I still don't know how you retain all this stuff, which and it's awesome. But one of the things that comes to mind, and you guys bring it up quite a bit, and it's very important in the hot rod scene and the American classic car scene, in the collector scene here in the United States, is this concept of numbers matching, which is a little bit foreign to the import market. Now, BMW has gone overboard where they put the VIN on every panel and every part in the car, and that's a little bit too far to the extreme. And so how important is this concept of numbers matching in the auction world?
Well, that is probably the number one topic at different car shows, especially if there's judging there, where people are really wanting to kind of understand how that works, how it ties into the value, the desirability of the car. And I will just have to say that with as much attention that there is on those terms, and we'll use your term numbers matching here quickly, there really is no hard definition for it. And I'll explain that. Numbers matching simply means that the date codes on a major part and that the part numbers are correct for the year, make, model, and build date of the car itself. But that doesn't mean they're original to that car. And that's where it gets a little sticky. So original and numbers matching don't necessarily mean the same thing. A lot of times numbers matching is perceived as original. Let me give you an example. Guy buys a 1967 Corvette. It does not have an engine, has no engine in it. What does he do? He goes out and he says, well, I want to get a date coded, correct part numbered engine, cylinder heads, intake manifold, distributor, carburetor, fill in the blank. And he goes out and he researches that. And there's companies and places out there that are selling all kinds of stuff, and they're actually publishing these numbers out there so you can sort through it. So when the smoke clears, he's got a numbers matching engine in his car, but he doesn't have the original engine. Now, you mentioned about BMW putting the VIN or a derivative of the VIN on a variety of different parts. Corvettes, other cars have done that too, not to that extreme, but of course, the oldest trick in the book is restamping those numbers on an engine, in particular, an engine block in particular. There's a stamp pad where they would stamp on at the factory. They would go ahead and they would stamp those numbers on there. That stamp pad could be cleared off of a number and it can be restamped. So, you know, trying to prove numbers matching, original, again, numbers match. It's not illegal to stamp the VIN on a block. It would be illegal or fraud to say that that's the original engine when the perpetrator purposely did it. Or he could say this was a restoration block. We installed it during the restoration and we restamped the original VIN on it. Full disclosure. So anyway, how important is it to buy a car that's fully documented, ironclad, with an ownership chain and a judging chain going back many years, where in likelihood none of this trickery was performed on? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of those cars out there, thanks to folks like MCA, Mustang Club of America on that end, FCA, Ferrari Club of America, Porsche Club of America, Bloomington Gold. I mean, the list goes on. GTOAA, Pokey, Pontiac Open Club International, goes on and on. They go a long way to help people understand what might be considered to be original, what might consider to be numbers matching. There's guidebooks and there's all kinds of things out there to help somebody kind of work through all of that. But the bottom line is original cars with a great pedigree, where you know the main components are original to the car, are the most valuable and sought after cars. Doesn't mean a car's not good if it doesn't have it. Doesn't mean that at all. It just means that investment grade A-list collectors will try to seek out the best of the best. And those would be cars with the history, the provenance, the documentation that, you know, this car is exactly what you think it is.
Yeah, one question building on that, John. You said it doesn't mean it's not a bad car. Would I be right in assuming too, let's just stick to the Corvette Porsche thing with numbers matching, because that audience seems to be very, very particular about getting numbers matching, all original. They want the best of the best of the best of the best. But
Yep.
if you're
All
just
true.
a young guy getting into, you've always liked Corvette, you've always liked Porsche, you just want that car. It's been in a wreck, the engine's been replaced, it's all kind of original. It's the right equipment. Would you discourage somebody younger with limited finances who happens upon a Corvette or happens upon a Porsche or whatever it might be, and tell them, you might want to save some more nickels and dimes and wait for that perfect numbers matching all original car? Or would you just say, yeah, Joe Blow, you did, that looks like a great car, yeah, it's been wrecked, but you can enjoy it, you can get out there and have some fun? I mean, it kind of depends, doesn't it, as to who you are, as to whether it's important. Would that be fair to say?
Very fair. I said, as part of that description, I said a couple of key words, and that was investment grade A list. Look,
Right.
a Porsche, a vintage Porsche, a vintage Corvette that has an excellent pedigree. Well, guess what? That's not a driver. Yeah, you can maybe drive it on and off of your trailer, drive it in and out of the garage, maybe drive it, around the block in your neighborhood just to exercise it once in a while. But that's not a car that you're going to get in and drive and enjoy. A car that doesn't have the original engine, car that has been repainted. There's an unlimited amount of times an engine can be changed, a car can be painted, a car can be restored. Those are the cars, and they're cheaper. Those are the cars that you want to buy and drive and enjoy. And honestly, without any agenda at all, it's those buyers, it's those enthusiasts that are getting out and experiencing what it's like to be behind the wheel, the controls of these vintage cars. That's where the real enjoyment is. The big collectors with the fancy garages, with all their cars, with all their displays. Hey, that's great. They sit there, they bring their friends over, they watch the ball game while they're gazing at, all the beautiful cars. But that represents really a small portion of what the heart and soul of car collecting is. It's about folks that want to buy something they can drive and enjoy without worrying about it too much. Still worry about it, just not as much.
Yeah.
And there's the flip
Just like you
side.
said.
And there's the flip side of this equation. And I only bring it up because there was a program I watched recently where somebody actually took a numbers matching C2 Stingray convertible, stripped it down and turned it into an EV. And I think a part of all of us inside died that day. And you're like, why would you do that? And to Don's point, take another C2 that's been wrecked or that was in parts or in shambles, especially if you're going to strip it down to the chassis and start over again. It's like, why a numbers matching car? Sell that and then buy something else. You'll have money left over. So it also brings up the question of resto mods, right? And you see a lot of those on the auction block as well, tasteful or otherwise. What are your thoughts on resto mods in the classic car community?
Well, okay. Wow. Yeah. A lot going on there, Eric. First of all, I'm not familiar with the Corvette that had the EV conversion. I'm not familiar with that story.
I'll say this and edit it out. It was Downey's Dream Cars. So if you watch it, spoiler alert. Go ahead, continue.
So what we have learned, I would say, over the past maybe 10, 12 years is the acceptance. Well, reverse it, the popularity and ultimately the acceptance of the resto mod, pro touring, day two, replica. We can even put in there more about that in just a moment, where cars are being modified to suit individual's taste. Typically, not always, but typically those cars that are being modified, whether they're Cudas or Challengers or Chargers or Corvettes or Camaros or Mustangs, pick your flavor. Typically, they are base model cars, not the high trim levels, not the high horsepower versions, not with the original engines. And it's somebody taking a car, a project, and taking it and turning it into something that they want, what their vision is. And we've learned a few things about that recently. And that is, if those cars are done well, if they're done tastefully, they could bring some pretty big money. People say, well, why do resto modded cars bring more money than say like a restored, unmodified car? And in certain cases they do. And I'll say, it's easy, cost. If you do a resto mod, you're buying, a $25,000 engine, you're buying a $10,000 transmission, you're buying a $15,000 chassis, you're buying $5,000 worth of brakes. The list goes on and on and on and on, all the modified parts that you buy. And then the labor to craft and make all of that happen versus restoring a car from the 50s, 60s, 70s primarily, that are relatively simple cars, simple and robust cars to build, lightly modified, but to build basically back to stock standards. It's a huge part of the collector car market. It's a huge part of what we see on the auction block. Lifelong car guy, I'm totally 100% fine with it, with the exception of taking cars with their original drivetrains and pulling those out and modifying the cars to the point where they can't be ever put back to stock. I mean, anything is possible, but the likelihood. So when I hear the stories where a guy took a really great car to begin with and did a bunch of modifications, it kind of gets me cranked up a little bit. If it's a car that was a project and you see it in pictures and it sat in back of a barn forever and it was a derelict car ready for the junkyard, and now it's a $300,000 resto mod that's a showstopper, much in favor of that car getting a second life to a slightly younger demographic, by the way, than the folks that are coveting what's the heart of the collector car market, 50s, 60s, and early 70s cars, to a slightly higher or slightly older demographic that have a tendency to go more towards either original cars or just lightly modified cars.
You know, can I build on that a little bit, Eric?
Yeah.
Real quick, just getting your quick opinion here. Based on any changes you may have seen in audience at these auctions, you know, you brought it up, the older generation tends to appreciate the more pure, the more original form more than a modified car. I'm guessing you would say that the younger generation is more interested in a car that's much more drivable, fuel injection, disc brakes, power steering, that kind of stuff. Is that about right? Is that safe to say?
Right on. You absolutely, once again, you hit the nail right on the head. And first of all, let's define what a younger buyer is. You know, might we think that a younger buyer is a 20, 30, maybe 40-year-old guy? Probably not. I consider to be, in from what we see in our bidder registration records, is a 50-year-old guy is really kind of a younger buyer in the collector vehicle world. Yeah, there's some people that are younger than that, but that seems to be about the transition point for a lot of us, where hopefully your kids are raised, they're out of college, your career path is established, or your business is established, hopefully, and you're at the point in time in your life where you can kind of start enjoying the things that you're passionate about, whether it be, you know, a summer home on a lake somewhere, or an RV to go, you know, travel the summers in the state parks, or owning a cool car. So we are seeing that. I mean, we all know how strong the collector car market is. It's never been stronger, never been more robust. The crowds at the auctions, the results of the auctions, our sales, price per car continue to go up, 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 up. No end in sight for any of that. There's a huge excitement. There's a huge demand for cool cars right now. It doesn't really matter, you know, what year or what type of car you're talking about. It seems like there's an audience for everything out there. Frankly, it surprises me, but it also pleases me. And it makes me happy that it looks like down the road when I'm gone, the coveting, collecting, maintaining, driving these cars continues to be something that I don't think Americans want to give up. And just a final thought to this, you got to give a shout out to those companies out there that are supplying the reproduction and aftermarket parts to keep these cars going. Without them, this phenomenon would not be happening. And the best example that I can think of is the current craze over Broncos. You know, 15 years ago, you'd see a Bronco once in a while, but thanks to the aftermarket coming on board, making every single part, you could build a Bronco out of the parts catalog, literally from parts out of the parts catalog with no original Bronco parts. They're pretty simple vehicles. Anyway, it's these aftermarket companies that allow us to restore these cars, modify them, and enjoy them. And it's giving second and third life to a lot of vehicles. You know, C10 Chevy pickups are another good example of that. Corvettes and Mustangs were the first two that started. The aftermarket company's been around since the 70s on those vehicles. But there's many. This is not a pitch for any of the companies, although National Parts Depot sponsor MECUM, but they make a ton of stuff, and their catalogs are free, by the way. But you just got to give a shout out to all those guys, all the aftermarket folks out there doing anything from wiring harnesses to sheet metal to A to Z, soup to nuts.
You know, it's funny, John, you bring up the aftermarket, the reproduction parts, et cetera. And in another part of the conversation, you brought up how big the collector market is right now for collector cars. I think they go hand in hand. I really do. The availability of the parts makes
Absolutely.
it possible for guys who maybe have no skills in rebuilding a car. Now maybe they've got a shot because they can buy the part, put it on the car, and they're pretty much done. Thanks to companies like National Parts Depot, et cetera. I think they go hand in hand. I really do.
There's no doubt about it. We need them, they need us, but we need them as well. And as long as we've got, those of us that have worked on cars, worked on projects, understand how critical and important that is. And we're in a really good place right now. We're in a really good place with a lot of great options to be able to sort of express our desire, whether it be a certain body style, but yet we're not, we don't want an old school, power plant, suspension, or brake system. There's options out there. All I ask is, does anybody consider, doing it to a project car that needs a lot and maybe missing its original drivetrain, as opposed, as I said earlier, about, the donor car being a really good original car. That's not what I like to see. I like them all. That's the bottom line. Just choose carefully on your donor.
Perfect. Well, let's drop this thing into fourth and talk a little bit more about MECUM itself and the different auctions. So you, as a commentator, as you mentioned earlier, have to travel all over the country to different events. Obviously, MECUM's biggest event of year being Kissimmee, and there's lots of others: Monterey, Harrisburg, Las Vegas with the motorcycles only, things like that. How do you, as a commentator, make them all feel different, make them unique? How do you emphasize them when you're there? I mean, obviously, there's always the variables. You never know what kind of car is going to show up. It's sort of like a box of chocolates, right? But when you're preparing for these events, how do you get focused on the different geos that you're stepping into?
Well, fortunately for us, it takes care of itself, because each of our own individual auctions has its own personality. And let's take two extremes that you mentioned. We'll take our Kissimmee, Florida auction. Now, keep in mind, we're at Kissimmee twice. We were there in July for what we call our summer special, but that's a fraction of the size of our big auction, world's largest collector car auction. It's in January, Kissimmee, Florida, which is Orlando, by the way. That's a monster. That is an event that is that's a bucket list item for so many car enthusiasts, just to be able to go to that and experience 4,000 cars, crossing the auction block over a period of almost 2 weeks. It's just incredible. It is so big and so much fun, and it's continuing to grow and grow and grow each year. Then let's transition over to talk about our Monterey, California auction. That's our traditional auction during Monterey Car Week. That's obviously mid-August every year. It's our smallest individual auction, guys, only 600 cars. But of that 600 cars over 3 days, we will have the highest per car average of any MECUM auction. And I tell you this contrast of these two, because each of our auctions has their own distinctive personality and purpose. And part of what we do in setting up a day's lineup of cars is to explain to the audience. Keep in mind, typically our shows are 6 hours long. We'll explain at the top of the show, okay, here's what we're going to see today based on our experience. This is what we can look forward to. These types of cars. And of course, I just have to say, so much of what we do are cars that are in that entry and mid-level category that are affordable to a lot of people. And that's fun to see people come and buy a car that they wanted. And then 2-3 years later, we see them back, they're selling it. They're selling the SS396 and they're buying a GTO or 442. And then they're going to do the same thing in a couple of years, $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 cars. Maybe they're getting their money, maybe they're making a little bit, maybe they're losing a little bit, but they're having fun experiencing a variety of different cars. So there's some auctions that are better suited for, we'll call it the casual enthusiast, and then there's some that are suited more for the stuff on the high end, and other auctions that we have that span the entire spectrum of car collecting. So it's easy for us to be able to understand now, after doing this on TV for 16 years, to know really what to expect. Always a few surprises, but it's pretty easy for us to manage that. And I just have to say, final comment on this, I want everybody who might be listening to understand that we don't discriminate against low price cars. You got a $5,000 or $10,000 car, we'll welcome it. Now, you're not going to see that car run at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, but we're going to have a time and a place to put all collector cars of all price ranges. We do not discriminate. We do not turn anybody away unless you don't have a valid legal title, and the car must have a VIN tag on it that is a legally affixed legal VIN tag. And in today's world of cell phone cameras, we have everybody send us a copy on your cell phone of your title and of your VIN tag. Before we get too far into the process, consignment process, we make sure that the car is legal for us to sell. So,
Don, you're up.
Yeah, we're coming up to Monterey here pretty quick, aren't we, John? Monterey is right around the corner for us. And, you know, I remember going to Monterey, and it was always fun. You do a lot of foreign cars at Monterey, you know, and MECUM has gone from that muscles and more to pretty much, you know, you want anything. You want a Ferrari, no problem. You want a Bentley, no problem. You want a Mustang, no problem. They'll get it for you. You know, what can people expect when they go to Monterey? Is it going to be, obviously it's a smaller auction than what, say, Kissimmee would be. What can they expect when they go to Monterey?
All right, Monterey is strategically, we've been able to craft that to suit a specific purpose. First of all, is in the title, says a lot, the daytime auction. We know at Monterey during Car Week, there are a lot of events to attend. And a lot of those events are social events. And a lot of those events are in the evening hours. So as the daytime auction, what we do is we want to make sure that we get a full day's auction action in, but yet still will allow people to go out and do other things in the course of the afternoon into the evenings. Excuse me. So we limit it to 600 cars, 200 cars per day. The auction will start at 10 o'clock. Will be done by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We will have, it's the only auction like this too. We'll have more Ferraris than Camaros. We'll have more Porsches than Mustangs. Doesn't happen in any other MECUM auction.
Sorry, just thinking here, just remembering one of the auctions I went to. There was a tent. There was a massive tent, and it was just filled with these F40s, XJ220s. I mean, it was just mind-blowing. And I remember going to a couple of our subscribers later on that day and saying, hey, have you seen the, and they were Ferrari collectors. I remember telling them, did you see the tent at Monterey or MECUM? What do you mean the tent? And I said, oh, dude, you've got to get over there and see this tent. They've got like 5 F40s. They have F50s. They have Enzos. They have XJ220s. They have a MECUM? I'll never forget that look. MECUM? I'm like, yes, MECUM. You've got to go over there. You know, when somebody goes, you know, one thing I've always loved about MECUM, it's always been a real family-friendly event. Is there a fee attached to go as a spectator? Do you know that? Is there a fee?
Yeah. It's I'll tell you what, if you buy tickets in advance at MECUM.com, it's $20, kids 12 and under free. If you wait for the day of the auction and you just walk up and you want to buy a ticket, it's $30. That gives you full access to come into the auction grounds, look at all the cars. We've got seating available for those folks that are not bidders, that just want to sit and watch the action. There are no areas off limits to spectators, with the exception of the bidder area right in front of the stage. We've got seats and grandstands for everybody. So the feedback that we get for folks that aren't necessarily buyers, not necessarily sellers, although a lot of folks get there and they see a car and they immediately go over and sign up to be a bidder. That's always a lot of fun to watch that go down. But folks, the feedback we get, folks say a couple things. They say, number one, it's the best car show that we've ever attended because the cars are moving. There's the sound and the excitement, all of which is intentional in the bidding environment. That's all meant to stimulate our senses, our sense of competition. Urgency is stressed. And just as a spectator, not somebody necessarily buying or selling, is still very exciting to experience that. And you watch them, you see people sit there, they sit there for hour after hour, just kind of spellbound in the zone with us, as less than every 2 minutes, there's a completely different car rolling onto the block that you see, hear about, see whether it sells or doesn't sell, and what that dollar number is. And boom, right behind it is another car, completely nonstop. We love spectators. We encourage it. Some auction companies do not. They want bidders only. We're just the opposite. We love the energy, the enthusiasm, the support, the excitement of having big crowds, to come in and just enjoy what we do, with the thought, I guess, in the back of our mind that maybe someday these folks will be a customer, maybe not at this auction, but down the road. But more than that, it adds so much to the experience for all of us to see people that are just there for the love of the automobile, not buying or selling.
You know, going into that, what are some of the benefits to buying and selling at auction? Go into that for us a little bit. It might sound like a stupid question, but literally, what are some of the benefits of I want to buy something or I want to sell something?
Yeah, you know, there are other choices to both buy and sell a collector vehicle other than within the auction environment. But it's funny that over a course of many years, again, MECUM Auctions has been doing this for 36 years now. There is I guess, a reputation and a culture has developed as it being a full service, satisfying, fun to attend, fun to participate in, to go to an auction, pick out a car or two, buy a car, or if you're a consignor, to sell a car and not have to jump through so many hoops that you might have to, especially as a seller. If you're going to sell a high-end collector car, can you imagine the kind of inquiries you're going to get from brokers and people that want to trade and all these stories that you're going to hear? You consign your car to MECUM Auction, you don't give it another thought. We handle all of the drama, all the bidders, all the promotion. We handle literally everything from A to Z. We only need to know who to hand the check to when the smoke clears if they sell their car. That's it. That's all we need to know. So there's a big benefit to a seller, obviously, for that purpose. We make it easy. We make it convenient, and we have a reputation for getting top dollar. So it's really kind of a win-win situation on both ends. Similar from the buyer's side, from the standpoint that it's one-stop shopping. It's a superstore. It's not hunting on the internet, traveling all over the place, spending money only to find out that a car is not what it was described as, being disappointed, and doing that 2 or 3 times, and you begin to get disillusioned. Come to a MECUM auction, get there day before the car or cars that you're interested in, cross the block, look at it at your convenience, at your leisure. There's going to be a ton of cars to look at. Even if you decide not to buy any cars, you're still going to stick around and have a good time, meet some people, and maybe, just as importantly, maybe be exposed to some cars that you hadn't really thought of. Learn about another car or a body style or a color or an option, and maybe possibly even change a direction on what your collecting strategy might be by being exposed to hundreds and in most cases thousands of collector cars. It's fun, it's easy, it's convenient. People see it on television and they want to do it. Well, I want to sell my car. I saw it done. I want to be a buyer. I want to be like they are. And it's just over the years, guys, it's just snowballed and snowballed to the point where we're #1 in the world now. And I don't think there's anybody, there's just nobody else that's going to come up from behind us and take over, because our foot is to the floor right now. We're not backing off the gas. Frank MECUM is one of Dana MECUM's 4 sons. He's been slowly but surely and strategically taking over for his dad, Dana MECUM, who's still our president and still our visionary and still the guy that's, still the guy that's in charge. But Frank has really been taking on. We have a new generation of MECUM family member that's going to continue to take this company and move this company forward. And I'll tell you, got to give a work with Frank side by side with him for years. Give him all the credit for acknowledging that these European cars, both vintage and contemporary cars, from Ferraris to Lamborghinis and beyond, that this is going to be a big part of MECUM auctions going forward. And it has. But it's taken nothing away from the core of what we all started from, which was muscle cars, Corvettes, and 50s chrome and fin era cars. Heck of an organization, guys.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if somebody wants to, listening to this, they're inspired, they're going to go to Monterey, they want to sell something or they want to buy something, what would be their first step?
Well, let's take it from the sell side first. You've got a car that you want to sell. Absolute first step, 100% of the times, is you give MECUM Auctions a call, you talk to one of the consignment experts, consignment agent, and you discuss the car with that agent to make sure that we're all operating on the same page, especially when it comes to a realistic expectation of value. Guys, that is a huge point. We don't want people to consign a car and either the car doesn't bring what they want or the car doesn't sell. We don't want that. So, and it's always a hard balance between being realistic with somebody about what we think the car is actually going to bring, where that might be discouraging the entry. And for those folks where we could say, oh, sure, let's give it a try, let's get it in. And next thing you know, you got all these cars and they're not, you haven't made the sellers realistic, but you have a lot of cars on the lineup. That's a very, very fine line. So having that dialogue early on with the MECUM consignment department is critical to make sure that the car, that we think the car is up to the expectations of the seller within a certain window. I mean, if we think the car's worth $30,000 and a guy thinks it's worth $100,000, that's going to be a problem. But if the guy thinks it's worth 50 and we think it's worth 45, that's not a problem, because nobody can call a car within 10 to 20% either way. The collector car market is not that predictable, even with comparables that people use on our MECUM auction website that's easy to use to be able to look at past sales. Even with that, all these are the average age of a car to MECUM auction is 50 years old. You think all those 50-year-old cars today they were all created equal when they were new? Well, they're not all equal now. Some are stock, some are modified, some are original, some are color changes, some are engine changes, some aren't. There's 1,000 different variables. And we're well versed in it, and we'll counsel objectively with a potential buyer to make sure that they understand what our thoughts are. And the consignment process is pretty straightforward. You pay an entry fee to get it in the auction. That fee will vary from, say, $500 to $1,500 per car, depending on the value of the car, the day it's going to run, the time it's going to run, time and a place for everything. And then if the vehicle does sell, we collect a 10% commission. If it doesn't sell, you've only paid the entry fee. You take the car home. Now, insider pro tip, if you sell a car no reserve at a MECUM auction, meaning absolute sale, that commission rate of 10% gets cut down to 6%. You save 4 points. An expensive car, that's a big deal. And I'll tell you another tip. The vehicles that run across the MECUM auction block at no reserve, they get a lot of attention. And the more bidders you have on any individual lot, and this is true on any type of an auction, the higher the price is going to be. So you're seeing more and more to MECUM auction. You're seeing more and more vehicles being offered at no reserve, but yet the bulk of the cars still, that consignor wants that protection of a reserve, being in control of that price, not having to take less than they want. There's no risk at all with it. But those no reserve cars stand up, and we've seen a big increase. You guys, as viewers of the show, might have noticed that, where there's more and more individual consignments and collections all the time that folks enter no reserve and save 4 points. Talking about a couple $1 million worth of cars in a collection, that's a lot of money.
Do you notice, though, the no reserve cars, yes, they're going to sell because that's that. But do you notice those cars generally bring more money than not? If you have a reserve of, say, just for a number, $25,000, okay, reserve $25,000, it peters out, the bidding peters out around $20,000. Let's say a car goes in, same car, no reserve. It blasts over $25,000. Do you see a lot more of that than you do? Is it better to sell without a reserve, I guess, is the bottom line?
Okay, let me just tell you from my personal experience in 2 ways. Number one, from being a MECUM auction customer, I've sold cars and motorcycles at MECUM and memorabilia. We do that too. Schwinn Stingray bikes is an example I've sold. I've always entered no reserve. That's my personal strategy at a reserve auction, because I feel like those entries really stand out. They get extra attention. Mm-hmm. So I tell that to a potential consignor, and I advise and I counsel them on that. And I would say half of them say, man, I agree with you. I get it. I understand. I'm going to go that way. And then there's others say, I'm just not comfortable with that. Great. We'll go ahead and enter it with a reserve. Just be aware that if you want 25,000 and the high bid is 20,000, using your example, you will have that ability to take that reserve off and sell the car. You're not stuck to that number if the timing is right. But to give a final point to your question is, how do you know, is it the exact same car that runs through within minutes of each other to the same bidder audience that's not familiar with the other car? I don't know how you get 2 comparables to be able to say. I just have to base it on my experience of sitting there, calling the action at MECUM auctions on TV for the past 16 years, for being employed with MECUM since 2006, being involved in thousands of decisions from folks, no reserve versus reserve, collections, individual cars doesn't really matter. And I will just say this, I'll say this publicly. I've said it before. Never had anybody come back disappointed that they went the no reserve decision. I'm not trying to talk anybody into no reserve. It's a viable option. I believe that it works at a reserve auction. I believe in it. It's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to take that chance. And so that's why, 75% of all the cars we sell do have a reserve.
What do you think, shifting gears here a little bit, you've been in the auction world for quite a little while. Is there any one thing or any two things that have really shaken up the auction world? Are there any events that have happened or any changes that have occurred that have really made the auction world the oh wow moment?
I think it's I think that it's the visibility. It's the fact that auctions, collector car auctions, and even other automotive shows, the Build It shows and all that are so popular right now, all of that has put car collecting, auctions, all of that, it's put that into the public mainstream. And I think it's really helped not only MECUM auction, other auctions as well. And I think it's helped the collector car, the industry in general, as it began kind of as entertainment. And now it's a way to sort of chronicle and document and promote what happens at a collector car auction. And as we all know, it's exciting. It's stimulating. There's the X factor there. Some people say it's the cars, or it's the sound, or it's the auctioneer banter, it's the pricing. The bottom line is it's all of that. It's this cocktail that's just magical. Now, not everybody can pull it off, whether it be on television or not. Not everybody can pull that off the way that MECUM does. We have, I hate to be bragging, but we've got the best auctioneers, the best auction team. I think the best TV crew in the business. And I'm not talking about me, by the way. And it all conspires to make people say, man, this is fun. This is cool. I want to be a part of it. And it's just snowballed, and it's grown and it's grown. And, as I said earlier, it's not going anywhere. This market is strong. This market is here to stay, especially maybe as we transition towards a future where we don't have as many choices in ICE, internal combustion engine choices. There's still many segments of the population that have an emotional attachment to these vehicles, to these powertrains, to these power plants. And I don't see it going away. I don't see it going away in new vehicles for a long time. And I certainly don't see a big craze or a big transition to alternative power, EV, in vintage vehicles. There'll be onesies or twosies. They'll be out there from time to time. But man, we do 35,000 cars a year. And here it is, 2023. I'm not seeing it yet.
Yeah. Very good. Eric?
All right. All right, here we go. So you've mentioned several times, John, having been with MECUM for nearly 20 years, you've seen cars come and go in the thousands, in the tens of thousands at this point. But what else have you seen in the evolution of auctions? Has there been things that have shaken up the auction world, especially at MECUM? Was it mostly the introduction of online sales? And what other things have you seen? And let's talk a little bit about road art and on time and things like that.
Yeah. First of all, yes, let's talk about the transition or the addition of what we call absentee bidding, which would either be telephone bidding or internet bidding, or another way, which is actually called proxy bidding, where you can, in advance, you can let us know, there's a procedure for it, let us know what your maximum bid would be on a particular lot. Let's say you're not available to attend the auction in person, or be on the phone, or be on a computer. You can give us a proxy bid. You can also be on the telephone, and you can also be on the internet. And I will have to say that we're coming out of what I call the pandemic era now. We have learned and we have transitioned as a company, being known as a very exciting live auction company, but we have improved our hardware and software over a period of time to be able to accommodate all types of this absentee bidding. And it's been huge. It has added a tremendous amount to the accessibility about what we do. And as covering the action on the TV show, you see it, we talk about it. We put the camera at the internet bidder. We put the camera at the phone bidders. We even have got microphones where you can even hear what they're saying to the potential potential buyer on the other end of the line. And we try to cover that and bring everybody into the experience. That has been a huge part of it, of our growth and our accessibility. And the other part of it is what you mentioned. It's not all about collector cars. It's about tractors. It's about motorcycles. It's about road art, which that's our trademark name for anything that might be automotive related, from oil cans, dealer displays, gas pumps, vintage toolboxes. I mean, the list is massive. And if that market is huge, neon signs, vintage porcelain signs, automotive memorabilia is a phenomenon right now. The prices are wild on that stuff. And MECUM Auctions, being an auction company that specializes in the sale of collector vehicles, but is wide open for anything that might fit in with that might go hand in hand. And we've seen it's gotten to the point where we'll have memorabilia at our auctions. We'll have memorabilia specific days sometimes at our auctions. Our Kissimmee auction and our Indianapolis auction are two in particular that do. And then we've got what we call MECUM on Time right now, where we're always running an auction nonstop. There's one running right now. And where it might be smaller items. It could be like right now, there's a big one. I just got an email notification where we're doing a bunch of die-cast cars. So if you're a die-cast car fan, go to MECUM.com, click on online and see what they've got out there. And I also want to stress that it's really easy to get signed up as a bidder for any of this stuff, whether you want to come to an auction or whether you want to just bid online or bid on the telephone. We don't make people jump through hoops. We're very trusting in a lot of ways. It's very simple and straightforward. And once again, you can do it online, or you can call our office and talk to somebody there and get all your questions answered. And we love to hear from people. We love to help people and steer them in the right direction. But we never put any pressure. We never tell people what that doesn't come from our hearts. This is we're too visible. We've been in business for too long. There's too much at stake to be creative. And so we try to give everybody the best service. Bottom line, we try to treat everybody like we'd like to be treated ourselves. And, I just got to tell you guys, that strategy, once again, has really paid off for this company. We're on one heck of a roll. We blasted through the pandemic era. Not everybody was able to hold auctions. We did. We pivoted. We found a way to do it through masking and social distancing and getting special approval from various counties and organizations to help us figure out a way to do it. And even through the pandemic, we've experienced record years after record years. We're just, it's incredulous, the support for the collector cars and for us as a company that's still providing the ability for folks to buy and sell and spectate and enjoy, or watch our TV show and hopefully enjoy looking at the cars, even if you're not going to buy one. Obviously we encourage that as well. #1 rated show on Motor Trend.
Well, John, we have reached that part of the episode where I get to ask you the final question, which is any shout outs, promotions, or anything else you'd like to share that we haven't covered thus far.
So much of the credit for what we do, for those of us that are visible in the company, the auctioneers, the auction staff, which would include the folks out that are our bidders assistants, those of us on the TV crew, my host Scott Hoke and Bill Stevens, and Stephen Cox, Katie Osborne, who's out right now on maternity leave. She's going to have her baby in September, her first baby. Chris Jacobs, everybody knows him from Overhauling. But it goes way beyond that. It goes to the entire crew, man. It takes about 350 people to run a MECUM auction. These people are brought in from literally around the country. We have a full-time office staff of about 150 people at our headquarters up in Walworth, Wisconsin, that are right now, as we're speaking, they've got their head down working future auctions on top of each other. That's not our road crew. That's our office crew that stays home. And then there's those of us on the other end that will leave the office and go out on the road. And we're bringing in, like I said, about 350 people to run these auctions. And there's a lot of moving parts, but everybody works hard to make sure this thing operates like a well-oiled machine. got to give a shout out to them. And then of course, Dodge, the Brotherhood of Muscle, they're our exclusive automobile manufacturer. A lot of changes going on in the automotive world right now, but Dodge telling us they're going to maintain that Brotherhood of Muscle image. They're going to keep pushing forward with cars that are fun and exciting to drive. And I have no doubt that they're not going to be able to stay on course. So, and then finally, thanks to you guys for having me on. We've had a great conversation, and anytime you guys want to talk cars, talk MECUM, talk trends, I'm on board to do it with you guys.
John Kraman is the man with a real passion for classic and collector cars. He holds his personal collection near and dear, with some of his favorites being a 1964 Pontiac GTO, a 2014 Mustang GT, and a 2010 Corvette C6. Outside of his work with MECUM and cars, Kraman enjoys spending some time with his wife, Christine, his 4 grown children, and 5 grandchildren, as well as connecting with his rock and roll roots, playing guitar and singing in a classic rock trio known as Redline 7000. To learn more about John, you can connect with him at mecum.com or on social media at Car Kraman on Twitter or on LinkedIn. And don't forget, you can tune in every 2 weeks for a new episode of MECUM on the Move podcast hosted by John.
Well, John, I can't thank you enough for coming on Break Fix and sharing your life story with us and how you have become the voice of the #1 auction in the world. And I look forward to seeing you in person at future MECUM auctions, but also, catching up with you on TV and learning from your encyclopedic knowledge. And, I can't thank you enough for what you're doing. It's fantastic, and just keep up the good work.
Well, you got it, Eric. Thank you so much. Really always appreciate it. And Don, thank you, brother, for everything that you do out there. Love the magazine. Never miss a chance to look at it. And that's another important element of the collector car world as well, where we display and how we display our pride and joy. Maybe more about that on the next episode.
That'd be great. Are you going to be at Monterey?
Yes, I will. We are doing TV on Monterey is going to be Friday and Saturday. Will be 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So that's a short day for us, only 4 hours each day. That will be on Motor Trend TV and on Motor Trend Plus, which is their streaming service, by the way. And yeah, I'll be there. So hopefully we'll get a chance to see you guys. Do you have a schedule yet on when you're going to be there? And Eric,
We're right on top of that.
Are you going?
Yeah, we'll be
I
there.
will be in tow.
We arrive on the 12th, actually. Well, the 11th we get there. I never let that be known. But we'll be right. Public on the 12th. But yeah, we'll be there literally from the 12th to the 21st. So we have a real long haul in front of us.
Yeah. Do you know what day you're going to be at MECUM yet?
What days are you there? I remember back in the day, it used to be you started around Wednesday on setup. Was that right? Or Tuesday on setup, something like that?
Yeah, the auction, let's see, I looked at the schedule. The auction will go the 17th, 18th, and 19th. That's Thursday through Saturday. We're going to be on TV the 18th and the 19th, but on Thursday, the 17th, that's the setup day for the TV side of it. The auction will be going on. The auction's got a full day of auction there. So I'll be out. If you guys are out on Thursday, let's get a chance just to hang out a little bit.
Sounds good. Are you in town on Wednesday?
No, Wednesday is my travel day to Monterey.
To Monterey. When are you in town on Wednesday?
Late.
Okay.
Late.
Right.
Driving up from LA. It'll be late.
Oh, you're driving up from LA?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm
from LA too originally. I'm from LA too originally, so yeah.
Where do you live now?
Currently, I live in the Dallas area in Texas.
Okay. What about you, Eric?
I'm in the great state of Maryland.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So where do you guys stay out there? Where do you stay in Monterey? That's usually the biggest